Welcome to this video. Today I will tell you two stories that will give you goosebumps. If you like the video, give me a like and subscribe. The Forgotten Village. In a remote part of the country, far from city lights and the hustle of modern life, there was a small, scarcely known village named Ravensburg. Only old maps showed its existence, and it wasn't captured by any current GPS devices. The few who dared to speak of this place did so in hushed tones, as if the name of the village carried a dark power. The story of Ravensburg began in the 17th century, when it was known as a thriving community, famous for its beautiful gardens and grand festivals. However, one day, the village simply disappeared. No signs of violence or catastrophe, just a gradual emptiness settling over the place. The people who once lived there were never found. It was speculated that they had been taken to another dimension or world, or that something malevolent had removed them. Centuries later, in the modern world, a young historian named Daniel Thorne came to the area, intrigued by the mysterious story. Daniel was determined to uncover the secrets of the abandoned village. He had discovered an old map showing the way to Ravensburg, and though it was heavily worn, he could still discern the general route. Armed with equipment and resolve, he set out. As Daniel entered the forest, he immediately noticed that the atmosphere changed. The trees seemed to close in tighter, the air was still, and an unsettling feeling spread through him. After hours of trekking, he reached a clearing, and there it was, the remnants of Ravensburg. The buildings were weathered and overgrown with moss. The once splendid village was now a ghostly ruin. The fog that lay over the place made the structures appear even more eerie. Daniel proceeded cautiously, his flashlight piercing only a small portion of the impenetrable darkness. As he moved through the streets, he discovered strange symbols and markings on the walls of the houses that he couldn't understand. They were not ordinary characters, but eerie, distorted images resembling ancient incantations. The sense of unease grew stronger, and Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that he was not alone. He entered what seemed to be the village's main building, once a kind of community hall. Debris from old furniture and documents littered the floor, swallowed by time. In a corner, he found an old book, preserved through the centuries. It was bound in leather, and the writing on the cover was barely legible. Daniel opened it carefully and began to read. The book was filled with strange drawings and texts about ritual magic and the awakening of darkness. The texts described a ceremony to lift the veils between worlds. Suddenly, Daniel heard a faint yet piercing whisper. It seemed to come from the very walls, and the words were barely intelligible, but the intensity of the whisper grew. The temperature in the room dropped noticeably, and a cold wind began to blow, though no windows were open. The noises grew louder, as if invisible hands were scratching the floor and banging against the walls. Daniel hastily packed the book and headed outside, when an unnerving vision overtook him. Before his eyes appeared a distorted, ghostly figure, a kind of grotesque being, half human, half mist. Its eyes were deep black voids, and its mouth was a gaping wound, emitting only empty screams. Panicked, Daniel ran through the village streets as the fog thickened and the shadows seemed to dance around him. When he reached the clearing, he thought he was saved, but the fog was so dense that he lost his way. In the thick fog, he could barely find the path back. Just as the darkness enveloped him completely, he stumbled upon an old, cracked mirror leaning against a tree. The mirror was dusty and dirty, but when Daniel looked into it, he didn't see his own reflection. Instead, he saw the village as it must have looked centuries ago, alive, vibrant, but also tinged with a strange darkness. The people in the reflection stared at him with a cold, curious interest. An unsettling thought came over him. The people weren't simply taken away. They're here, in this other world, in this mirror. The realization made him shiver. The mirror was a portal, a window into another dimension where the souls of the villagers were trapped. At that moment, as Daniel completed the thought, the mirror seemed to warp, and the reflection of the villagers began to move. The people in the mirror reached out to him, as if trying to pull him through the glass. Daniel felt an irresistible urge to move closer to the mirror, as if an invisible force was pulling him toward it. With all his strength, he fought against the pull of the mirror and ran further. The fog eventually cleared, and Daniel found the edge of the forest. He returned to town, out of breath and completely exhausted. In the days following his experience, he was plagued by nightmares. The visions from the mirror haunted his dreams. He tried to study the book he had found to learn more about the dark rituals, but it seemed to transform into another language he couldn't decipher. He never found out what really happened in Ravensburg. But one thing he knew for certain: the village existed not only in the past, but as a place where the boundaries between worlds were blurred. The souls of the people who once lived there were still trapped, and it was only a matter of time before they sought new souls to end their loneliness. As Daniel eventually left the town and moved to a different area, he hoped that the dark past would not catch up with him. Yet in his quiet moments, when darkness fell over him, he still heard the whispers from the mirror, reminding him of the day he discovered the forgotten village of Ravensburg and the horrors that lay hidden there. The last message. In the small town of Pinewood, there was an old, abandoned house at the edge of the woods that everyone avoided. Locals said it was haunted, and tales of eerie occurrences kept the curious away. But when Emma, a thrill-seeking college student, moved to Pinewood, she was drawn to the house, fascinated by its dark history. One rainy evening, driven by curiosity and armed with her camera, Emma decided to explore the house. As she stepped inside, the floorboards creaked ominously, and the air was heavy with dust and decay. The walls were covered in peeling wallpaper, and the faint smell of mildew lingered. She wandered through the rooms, snapping photos, until she reached the basement. There, she found an old, rusty trunk hidden behind some rotting furniture. With some effort, she managed to pry it open. Inside, she discovered a pile of old letters and a single, battered journal. The journal belonged to a girl named Sarah who had lived in the house decades ago. The final entry was scrawled hastily. "If you're reading this, then the curse has found a new host. It's not just in the house, it follows you. Beware the last message, for it is your doom." Emma laughed off the entry, thinking it was just an old superstition. But as she left the basement and climbed the stairs, she noticed something strange. The air had grown colder, and the house seemed unnervingly quiet. The whispers that had been faint were now distinct and seemed to be coming from all directions. When she reached the front door, it was locked tight. Panic set in as she tried to force her way out. Her phone, which had been perfectly charged earlier, suddenly died. The whispers grew louder, forming coherent sentences. "You're not alone. You can never leave." Emma's heart raced as she turned to face the darkened hallway. She could hear footsteps echoing behind her, though no one was there. She stumbled through the house, desperately trying to find another way out. But the whispers followed her every step, growing increasingly frantic. In her desperation, Emma grabbed a letter from the trunk and tore it open. The message inside was chillingly clear. "The curse is alive. You are the next. We are watching. The house wants you forever." Suddenly, the temperature plummeted, and a cold hand gripped her shoulder. She spun around to see a shadowy figure with hollow eyes, its mouth stretched into a twisted grin. The figure reached out, and the whispers turned into a deafening roar. Emma's last scream was swallowed by the darkness as the house's doors slammed shut behind her. The next day, when locals came to investigate, they found the house exactly as it was before. The trunk was empty, the journal was missing, and Emma was nowhere to be found. In Pinewood, it's said that if you listen closely at night, you can hear Emma's desperate whispers and the sound of her final screams echoing through the abandoned house, a warning to anyone who dares to enter. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a subscription and give me a like. I look forward to seeing you again next time at Forbidden Tales.